What does a Quaker named Leeds, Benjamin Franklin, and the exiled brother of Napoleon have in common? If you guessed the Jersey Devil, then quite honestly, I'm pretty damn impressed with you because I didn't see that one coming when I researched it. Let's take that little teaser, put it in our Yankee Doodle Dandy caps, and start from the beginning, the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Now, there's something about the Pine Barrens. Over 1 million acres of pitch pines and sandy soil, so vast and so empty in places that it is called New Jersey's wilderness. And in that wilderness, for 3 centuries now, locals whisper about a creature. They call it the Jersey Devil, a winged, hoofed, shrieking beast that haunts the woods. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. One of the most famous supposed witnesses wasn't a farmer or a local trapper. It was Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's older brother, former king of Spain, and eventual exile in New Jersey. Today, we're digging into how a colonial family feud birthed one of America's oldest monster legends, how a European aristocrat got tangled up in all of it, and how that story helped cement the Jersey Devil as something more than just a campfire tale. It all started with a family, a feud, and some good, old-fashioned colonial pettiness. The central figures were the Leeds family, settlers in southern New Jersey. The patriarch, Daniel Leeds, was a Quaker, the religious movement famous for its simplicity, humility, a focus on inner light, and their famous breakfast oats. But Daniel wasn't content to keep things simple. He started publishing an almanac in the late 1600s, filled not just with weather predictions and crop notes, but also planetary movements, astrology, and even some casual occult references. My favorite kind. That obviously didn't sit too well with his Quaker brethren. For Daniel's neighbors, astrology was pagan nonsense at best and devil's work at worst. In 1690, Quaker leaders publicly censored Leeds. His books were viewed as heretical and outright dangerous. So, Daniel Leeds did what anyone backed into a corner might do. He doubled down. He embraced his role as an outsider and leaned into more esoteric and royalist positions. He sided with the crown in a colony where many were leaning towards independence. He published pamphlets attacking his fellow Quakers, calling them hypocrites. He became essentially the neighborhood jerk. Fast forward to the next generation. Daniel's son, Titan Leeds, inherits the almanac business. In 1733, he finds himself in a very public feud with the rising star of American publishing, Benjamin Franklin. Franklin, through his Poor Richard's Almanac, jokingly predicts that Titan will die on October 17th of that year, down to the very hour. Titan, needless to say, is not amused. When he managed to survive to October 18th, he publicly called Franklin out for being a liar. Franklin, being the smarmy SOB that historians don't often call out for his dickishness, dug in his heels and retorted that Leeds did, in fact, die, and that he was actually just a disgruntled ghost now who hadn't realized he'd passed away on the date and time that Franklin had originally predicted. From then on, Franklin referred to Titan Leeds as good Mr. Ghost, needling him year after year after year. Leeds verbally tried firing back a few rounds, but in the court of public opinion, he just looked humorless and rattled. Franklin's readers, on the other hand, ate it up, along with a lot more subscribers. What started as a petty publishing war made Titan into a laughingstock, and in a culture already suspicious of the Leeds name, it cemented the family's association with the weird and the uncanny. Put all of this together, the Quaker condemnations, the royalist leanings, the occult-tinged almanacs, Franklin's public trolling, and the Leeds family became, in the public eye, the others. They were different, weirdos, not in the good way, not trustworthy, not godly. By the mid-18th century, the Leeds name was toxic. Daniel Leeds had been branded a heretic by the Quakers. Titan Leeds had been mocked into the grave by Franklin's good Mr. Ghost routine. And then there was the Leeds family crest. The emblem the family used on their publications showed a wyvern, a dragon like beast with a forked tail, clawed feet, and leathery bat like wings. For neighbors already suspicious, that wasn't just decoration. It looked to them like proof. When they said Leeds devil, they weren't imagining something out of the air from scratch. They were pointing to something that they had literally seen stamped on the family's books and papers, a winged, fork-tailed monster. Over time, those wyvern images bled into the folklore surrounding the Jersey Devil, and what started as an insult aimed at an unpopular family fused with the very real dragon symbol that they used to represent themselves. From there, the story snowballed. By the late 1700s, the Leeds Devil wasn't just a family slur anymore. It had taken on a life of its own as a supernatural creature of the pines. That's when the Mother Leeds curse story was grafted on top. Genealogical records show that Japhet Leeds, a member of the family living near what's now Leeds Point, New Jersey, had a wife, likely named Jane or Deborah, who bore him 12 children in the early 1700s. Oh my God, that's so many kids. Locals called her Mother Leeds. With a household that large, it wasn't hard for gossips to imagine one pregnancy too many pushing her over the edge. That's when the legend says she cursed her 13th child, shouting, "Let it be the devil!" In the story, the baby, after being born, twisted into the very shape of the Leeds wyvern, bat wings, hooves, forked tail, and all before flying up out of the chimney and into the night. So what began as religious censure, petty almanac feuds fueled by a famous founding father, and a bad luck family crest had, over time, fused with the life of an actual Pine Barrens matriarch. By the 19th century, the Leeds Devil had shed its role as a slur and been reborn as the monster that we still call Jersey Devil to this day. So, the real question, in my opinion, is how the F did Joseph Bonaparte come into play in all this? First, just for the sake of the podcast and your listening ears, some background on Joseph. He was, like we said before, Napoleon's older brother. He was born in Corsica in 1768. He was a lawyer, a diplomat, and, by the grace of his brother, twice a king, first of Naples and then of Spain. He actually wasn't a bad ruler by the standards of the time. In Naples, he introduced reforms, he improved infrastructure, and actually earned some popularity. In Spain, though, not so hot. That was a disaster. The Spanish people rejected him as a bit of a puppet, and the Peninsular War pretty much ground his reign into dust. By 1815, after Napoleon's final defeat at Waterloo, Joseph was finding himself way out of options. He fled Europe, crossing the Atlantic, and settled in Bordentown, New Jersey, just north of the Pine Barrens. Once there, Joseph built an estate called Point Breeze, a sprawling mansion filled with art, books, and treasure that he had smuggled out of Europe. Contemporary visitors to the house described it as one of the most magnificent homes in America, second only to the White House. He landscaped the grounds, he entertained American politicians and writers, and basically lived like a displaced king. And he hunted frequently. And this is where the history leaves off and the folklore takes over. While hunting one winter in the 1820s, according to later accounts, Joseph spotted strange tracks in the snow. They looked like hoof prints, but not like any deer or other hoofed animal that he was familiar with. The tracks went on in a straight line, even over fences and through undergrowth. Impossible for a natural creature, in his opinion. He followed them, and as the story goes, came face to face with a winged beast. It stood on spindly legs with a body like a horse and bat-like wings against its back. It opened its mouth, and a scream, not of a beast, but of a man in torment, chilled Joseph to the bone. Joseph was shaken, but he lived to tell the locals, who assured him that he had just had an encounter with the notorious Jersey Devil. Do we have a letter from Joseph describing this? Of course not. Is there a diary entry? Nope. In fact, the very first written version of this tale doesn't appear until decades after the supposed incident. But the bones of the story do line up. Joseph Bonaparte really did live in New Jersey. He really did hunt those woods, and he really is the kind of figure whose name lent instant credibility to local lore. Once Joseph's supposed sighting entered the folklore, the Jersey Devil wasn't just a backwoods monster anymore. Now it was a creature witnessed by royalty, by a Bonaparte. That gave the legend a pedigree. Throughout the 1800s, newspapers and storytellers repeated Joseph's name alongside the devil. The combination for them was irresistible. A fallen European king and a homegrown American monster, both wandering the same wilderness together. For locals, on the other hand, it added weight. If someone as educated and as worldly as Joseph Bonaparte could see the devil, then maybe it wasn't just all superstition. Now, the Jersey Devil legend might have simmered quietly through the 1800s, but in January of 1909, it exploded into full-blown hysteria. Over the course of one frigid winter week, newspapers across New Jersey and Pennsylvania ran story after story after story of sightings, a winged beast flying over towns, strange hoof prints appearing in the snow, on rooftops, in backyards, and even inside buildings. Schools closed. Factories shut down. Trolley drivers claimed they were attacked mid-route. Police officers reported firing their guns at the creature while a fire chief swore he heard its inhuman scream. What kicked this frenzy into gear was the press. Competing local papers were hungry for circulation, and sensational monster stories sold. One report fueled the next, each paper amplifying the scare until people were genuinely afraid to leave their homes. The legend had always been there, but 1909 marked the moment it went mainstream, transforming the Jersey Devil from a regional curiosity into a national headline grabber. So, where does that leave us? Here's what we know for certain. The Jersey Devil legend sprouted from colonial politics, Quaker feuds, and Benjamin Franklin's sharp tongue. We know Joseph Bonaparte really did live in New Jersey, really did build Point Breeze, and really did stalk the edges of the Pine Barrens with his rifle in hand. And then there's the part we can't pin down. Did he actually meet something in the woods that night? Something winged? Something that left tracks that no hunter could explain? Or did his name simply fuse with a story already whispered about throughout the pines, giving it a pedigree that helped it live on? Either way, the result is the same. Once Bonaparte's name entered the scene, the Jersey Devil stopped being just some random boogeyman and became something bigger. A legend that straddled continents, binding Europe's fallen royalty to America's wilderness. And if the Pine Barrens could tempt kings and terrify farmers alike, who's to say what still stirs in those woods when the night goes quiet? Before we go, we have 2 new member shoutouts to give. A big thank you to Lori and Derek. Thank you both for supporting the podcast. And thank you all for listening or watching today's A Culture Shock podcast. New podcast episodes go live every Tuesday, although we're a little late on this one on Patreon because I was still recovering from international travel yesterday, so my apologies on that. However, if you are interested in supporting the show, as well as having access to extra show goodies that I make, including this podcast in full video format, feel free to join us over on our Patreon page at patreon.com/acultureshockpodcast. I am your writer, your host, and your editor, Jessica Chobot. You can find me across most social media pages, but I'm the most active over on my Instagram page at Jessica_Chobot. This has been the A Culture Shock podcast. Thank you all for getting weird with me today, and also last week in Utah for Phenomicon. I had a wonderful time at the event and getting to meet all of you seekers and talking with you guys and hearing your stories. It was an absolute blast. Until next week, toodles!